My name is Lot. I used to live in a palace down at Sodom, and right now I'm in a cave with two of my wicked daughters and their naughty little boys, Ammon and Moab. They cry all day long, and their mothers fight with them and with each other. We live in poverty and shame. But let me go back to tell you about my background. I was born in a place called Ur of the Chaldees. My father's name was Haran. He eventually died at Ur. The other uncle's name was Nahor. And then my favorite uncle was called Abraham. My grandpa was called Terah. We all worshipped God at times, and the other times we worshipped the moon god at Ur of the Chaldees. There was a huge ziggurat, and we went up there to pray to the moon. And then at times we prayed to Yahweh, the God of Noah. And then God spoke to Abram and he said, Abram, you must leave Ur of the Chaldees and move to the promised land. So he influenced my grandfather and all the family, and we moved up to Haran. We stayed there for a while. It was on the trade route. We made good business there. And then at my grandfather's funeral, Terah's funeral, God spoke again to my uncle Abram. He said, you must move. You must move to the promised land. I'll make a great nation from your descendants. And I decided, I was the only one, I decided that I'll go with Uncle Abram. So we left Haran. What a journey. What a journey. This was not cake and cream. This was hard work. Eventually drought came to the land of Canaan, the promised land, and we left for Egypt. Then something tragic happened. I was so shocked in what my uncle Abram did. He said to the Egyptians, Auntie Sarah, this is my sister. And what happened, eventually, the Pharaoh of that time, called Sesostris III, some call him Senusrit III, took Sarah into the harem. And Abram, my uncle, was devastated. Eventually, plagues hit the palace of the Pharaoh. And he discovered that this was not Abram's sister, it was his wife. To get rid of us, he gave us slaves, camels, you name it. We became multimillionaires overnight. One of the girls that helped him in the harem was called Hagar. So we left. And Abram went back to Bethel, that means house of God, where he built an altar and he renewed his relationship with God. But you know, problems never stop. We had such a big herd of cattle and sheep and goats that the people who looked after them, the servants, quarreled, you know. So Abram said, my brother, we cannot live like this. Let's separate. And my wife was the instigator for the separation because she was a worldly type of person, and Uncle Abram was a God-fearing man. So we separated, and I chose the most beautiful, I think, place on the planet. Oh, it was like the Garden of Eden. So we pitched our tent some distance from Sodom. Beautiful place. So my wife could go there and do her shopping. And then we moved closer and closer. Eventually, we were right in Sodom. But the rate of crime was so unbelievable. But you know, one get used to crime as well. You learn to live with it. And then tragedy struck. Kedali Omar from Elamite came from Elam, and he captured us a big lot of us, and he took us away. That night we slept at a place called Dan, at the foothills of Hermon, the Mount Hermon. Can you imagine the emotions we experienced? We've lost everything. We are captives on our way to a strange land with no future. I wept and I said, God, I'm so sorry that I moved into Sodom. But then, God is so merciful. Abram heard about this. And with 2 Amorite kings, he came with an army. And that night, while Kedorlaomer was drunk with his soldiers, he rushed to his army. They scattered, and we managed to get Lot, his wife, and some of the people of Sodom to come with us back to Jerusalem, Salem, where we met a king priest called Melchizedek. And I learned something wonderful from my uncle Abram. He gave the king priest Melchizedek 1/10 of the booty. And then came the king of Sodom, and he said to Uncle Abram, you can have all the booty. So Abram said, no, not a shoelace, nothing. When it's about salvation, rescue, emancipation, deliverance, there is no price attached to it. It's like God's grace. You don't pay for it, for our deliverance, for our salvation. Well, I said to my wife, I'll never go back to Sodom, but she nagged at me. So eventually we moved into our house. My friends, I want to tell you that was a big mistake. Our children grew up in the most wicked city in the planet. And then one afternoon I became a judge. I was sitting in the gate. The city gate was like a courthouse. And 2 strangers came into the gate, and I invited them to come and sleep over at my place. And they said, no, we'll sleep in the plane, that's all right. I said, gentlemen, you cannot do it. This is a wicked place. People will harm you. And eventually I persuaded them, and they came to my house. You know what happened? Within an hour or 2, the old and the young men of Sodom knocked at my door. And guess what they said? Bring out those 2 strangers. We want to sleep with them. They were all homosexuals, sodomites. I said, no, gentlemen, you can't do it. And there was an argument. Eventually I said, you can have my 2 daughters. They are virgins. They said, listen, we'll treat you worse than the 2 strangers. At that time, these 2 guests of mine pulled me into the house. And they struck the mob with blindness. But this was not only a physical blindness, it was also a mental blindness. They couldn't get into the house. And then the shock. They said, tomorrow morning we are going to destroy Sodom and the cities of the plain. So go and tell your children to leave Sodom immediately. And then I realized the reaction from my children, that they've got no desire to leave that wicked city. I was to blame. They thought I was getting mental. Early the next morning, the angel said to us, let's go. My wife tarried. I tarried. I was uncertain as to what to do. My children, I can't leave them behind. And this mansion, it took me a lifetime to get the wealth that I've got. And then the angels came and took me and my wife by the hands and dragged us out of the plain. The other angel took my 2 daughters, dragged them out. And then God appeared on the scene. And he said, run for the mountains. Don't look back. Make haste. But with a luxurious life, I think my wife was unfit and overweight. And she complained all the way. She said to me, I don't want to leave the city. And she was aggressive. And as we were moving up, I said to God, please, we will not make it. Can we sleep at Zoar, a small city up the mountains? And he said, yes. At that stage, I'll never forget it. My wife turned round and as she turned round to where her heart was, she changed into a pillar of salt. Her statue is still over here. I visit the place often and I weep there. Eventually, God was also going to destroy Zoar. So we fled up to a cave. And this is where I am right now. A poor man. I am disgraced by what my daughters did. So may I teach you or share something about my love with you. Never take your children to a place where crime is rife. You're going to lose them. If you're in a situation right now, like I'm describing to you, see if you could move to a place, somewhere in nature, where you don't have to expose your children to crime. I cried before the Lord and I said, I'm so sorry. I've made a mistake. He's such a gracious God and He forgave me. And if you failed regarding your family and they left God, ask God to forgive you and start all over again, like me, in a cave, but with God in your heart. Thank you for watching this presentation. To subscribe to our channel, click here, then click the bell to get notifications. For the next presentation, click here. See you next time.